Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cartel Hour, where we do live tastings and discussions of all kinds of spirits with the people who make them, use them, and enjoy them. My name is Cameron Stevens.
And my name is Seth Benheim. Together, we're covering everything from familiar bottles to rare and exclusive releases from near and far away. If it's distilled, it's on the podcast.
Featured in Rolling Stone, GQ, Men's Journal, and more, we bring celebrity guests, master distillers, and industry veterans to chat about the latest in the spirits world. The Real McCoy. Was he a man, myth, or legend? Was Barbados the true birthplace of rum? What do age statements on a bottle of the sugarcane distilled spirit really mean? And does a beard make you a rum master? All of these questions and more answered while we learn all about the Real McCoy Rum. Our guest for this podcast was Nathan Hazard. Now, Nathan exploded onto the rum scene through his underground tiki parties and then went on to become the brand ambassador for Real McCoy Rum. Single blended rum that captures the authentic experience of the original rum runner during the Prohibition era. We talk about the entire lineup of Real McCoy, as well as a special tasting of early distillate done through pipettes into our glasses, all the way to a selection from their special rare releases. We're here to learn a little bit and drink a little bit, so grab a glass and let's enjoy. Welcome back to the Infusory for another episode of the Cartel Hour. My name is Cameron Stevens.
And my name is Seth Benheim.
And we're talking rum today, and we have got, some say, the master of rum. I don't know. I just made that up. But you come highly regarded in the rum world. Nathan Hazard. How's it going, man?
Hey guys, how are you?
Well, I'm doing really well.
I think it built him up so much there that you threw him off.
I'm blushing.
That's okay. Well, we're not even drinking rum yet, so let's see what happens. Once that gets once that gets going. But we have a very full lineup from the Real McCoy in front of us, and I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, these are coming at us from Foursquare Distillery in Barbados, and so this is our second foray into rum, and I'm very excited to, I think, explore already what seems to be a very diverse and different style of rum from anything we touched on in the last episode.
Very much so.
So certainly a whole different experience here. These are aged rums. They are coming at us the color on these already, just looking at the lineup is
the breadth
beautiful.
Of color is very, very much, it's a wider range than what we've had before.
Rich, deep, aged rums. So, Nathan, why don't you first just tell us a little bit about yourself?
And specifically, you have to include about the Coconut Club.
Yes.
Sure, can do. My name is Nathan Hazard. I am the national brand ambassador for the Real McCoy Rum. As mentioned, yes, we are a Barbadian rum from Foursquare Distillery in Barbados. Fun fact about that, it is the last family-owned distillery on the island where rum was born. So pretty serious rum legacy here. Myself, though, I came to rum, I guess I would say kind of by way of tiki. So Coconut Club, as mentioned, was a pop-up of mine that I did for a number of years in Los Angeles. We were kind of a roving underground supper club, secret society, members-only club.
Okay.
That did these kind of ridiculously over-the-top events and parties that had this like performative element as well. So it was kind of like somewhere between like dinner theater and a game show and a murder mystery and a tiki bar.
Wow.
It was just kind of everything all in one. We had this really like gregarious, crazy MC, and he had a lovely assistant, and there was a big glittery wheel you might have to spin, and there were curses. There was a giant tiki god that would get upset. There was...
Oh my God. This is like more of a game of sorts.
I'm thinking like Olmec from Legends of the Hidden Temple or something,
Yeah, no, exactly. And everyone got, when they became a member, they got a member's pin and a passport. Every cocktail had a different rubber stamp, and they changed every event. It was kind of like a collect 'em all. Like before Pokemon Go, there was, Coconut Club cocktails. I don't know.
Yeah. So did people have to like purchase tickets or something? How did that work?
Yeah, we did it a number of ways. It started as like, an 8-course chef's tasting dinner with cocktail pairings. Then you'd buy a ticket and show up, and there'd be a big communal table. And then we kind of decided to go more of like the cocktail party route. And then it went into more of a members only club where it was more just about booking, making a reservation. So we did a bunch of iterations over about the 4 years we were running. But it was cool. I mean, we got amazing press, like pretty much some of the best things you could ask for, like Vogue called us one of the top 5 underground dining experiences in America. And we're like listed next to Wolf's Mouth. And we're like, are you fucking kidding us?
Wow.
This is awesome. Like just a couple of like creatives trying to do something interesting, and it kind of took off. So that was fun.
That's awesome. And then, so how did that land you specifically at Real McCoy?
Actually, one day I remember I was getting ready for an event and I got a phone call, and it was from the guy who ended up hiring me to Real McCoy. But, my name had come up actually at Tales of the Cocktail, at some drunken party. He said he was looking for someone, and someone who ran a tiki bar, Marie King, who runs the Tonga Hut in North Hollywood. She was like, oh, you have to talk to Nathan. So, he called me up, and I was about to go out and do an event, but I was like, I absolutely want to get into this with Real McCoy. And I mean, just the elevator pitch alone, was so solid. The thing about this brand is it's kind of, they kind of do everything right. So it's a hard thing to look at and not see it as a pretty perfect storm.
Excellent.
Wow. Well, those are
big words to start off the tasting.
It's got me feeling thirsty.
I'm with you on that one. So why don't we now? You kind of have like a bonus intro little tasting for us.
Yes.
Can you explain what we're looking at here and how we might go about that before we actually get into the 5 rums of the lineup that you've brought?
Absolutely. Well, so we are what we call a single blended rum, and keyword there for what we're about to do is blended. And what that means for us is that it's all, this is all single distillery. So nothing is coming from different locations. And it's all grown on site too. So you could almost say single estate. But the blend refers to our 2 stills. So we have a 1,760 liter copper pot still, and then we have a twin column coffee still. So we blend distillate from both of those, and actually they're aged separately. There's a light and a heavy blend. Those are blended again. And so what I have here is a multi-column still distillate from the same island. And then I have our coffee still, and then I have our pot still. This one does have a little bit of age on it, but you're just going to see how completely different that same molasses wine in 3 different machines tastes on the other end.
Just at the output of that base spirit.
Yeah. I love that. That's a really cool thing to try. Most consumers don't get an opportunity to dive into this, so this provides some great context.
I feel like I've been transported to the distillery, and I'm like drinking on site. It has that sort of a vibe to it.
These actually came just directly from this. These are not anything that we package and sell. It's just little samples pulled at Foursquare.
Amazing.
Well, I feel special.
I know. I do. I too feel special.
You are special.
Well, I mean, one of those things that I promote heavily is going to see the distilleries when you have a chance, especially when you get back out into the world and start traveling again. Wherever you go, just type distillery on Google and go see the local distillery of wherever you are in the world.
It's my favorite way to travel.
It's the best way to figure out. It's the best way to fill a good afternoon. Hit the museums in the morning.
And I'm sure we'll touch on this too, but like the spirit ties into the culture, right? And I'm sure you can incredibly explore the lens of the culture of Barbados through rum, if that's what you wanted to do, especially since you said, it's the birthplace. But
especially, in the Caribbean, like if you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not going to every distillery you can. Like,
you're already there. Might as well.
Yeah.
So let's do it. So walk us through this. We've got.
So the first thing I'm gonna pipette into your glass here.
Okay.
Is this is a multi-column still distillate. This is from West Indies Rum Distillery, which is also in Barbados. It's not our distillery, but it's because we don't do this type of distillation. This is a multi-column still and molasses fermentation. And so what you should have is something incredibly neutral.
Yeah, that's as close to like, a vodka or like a proofed down Everclear. You know, I mean, there's a slight sweetness on the nose, but on the sip, it's nothing. It is there's not much there.
It's relatively I'm going neutral on that.
Yep, and that is
the mouth feels a little creamier.
Okay, so now what we're gonna do is I am gonna pipette some of our Foursquare coffee still with this is with no age at 50%.
And can you tell folks what the difference between a coffee still and a copper pot?
Sure. So Anus Coffee was an Irish guy who invented the continuous still. So the coffee still as a double. Well, this is a double still. Originally, it would have been a single column. Now this one is a double copper still. It's just a continuous still. So with a pot still, it's a batch. You can only do one batch at a time. It's just a very different archaic process, right? And once you get into continuous still, you're able to have a much larger output in much less time. However, the trade-off is flavor. So what you're getting here, though, is still, notice that compared to the one you just had, there's at least a little creaminess to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're getting some flavor.
I get a little sugar cookie almost.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
there's a little
like
kind
that.
of bright, lemony, tropical fruit thing, and the body is increased. But otherwise, it's.
I do get that baking note.
Yeah.
Which is where the cookie comes in. But yeah, it's a really evolved version of the first one.
Right. Sure.
Certainly would prefer to work with the second one.
Right.
Right. So when you have, a pot still, you're getting a lot of copper interaction in the helmet.
Right.
And then with a continuous still, there are plates in the columns that are giving you that interaction to kind of turn some of those acids into bases and remove sulfur components. But with a multi-column still, it is so efficient at extracting alcohol that it takes out all of the flavor. You're getting all of those congeners from fermentation are pretty much stripped. So that first one we had, it didn't really have much flavor at all. That was made in a fraction of the time of the others, which is why it exists, but it doesn't really give you anything to work with. Once you get into this end of the spectrum, the pot still, so this is a double retort pot still. That is something that is actually unique to the Caribbean. While the pot still technology came from Europe, of course,
right.
The double retort is something that was kind of added on in the Caribbean. And that just has two more bins for tails where your vapor is going to pass through to add even more flavor.
Got it.
Gotcha. This one is exploding with aromas, and it really has a lot more of that molasses shining out and coming through, as well as a little bit of that. And this is a slightly barrel aged, you said?
Yeah, this one, actually, I don't know the exact age on this. I want to say it's probably about 3 years, and this one's at 64%.
Yep, and it's definitely a little bit, you can feel the punch there, which is nice, which is actually quite nice.
So that's just like a little bit of context, really, as to, you can have the same fermentation, but depending on what kind of a still you're using, it makes a world of difference. So, rum is one of those categories that I think a lot of people admittedly know the least or very little about, even spirit nerds. And that's because it's kind of a beast to tackle, right? I mean, it's made in so many countries around the world. Every culture has their own version of it. And there's a lot that isn't really, enforced internationally is about rules. A lot of people call rum the Wild West, which is absolutely not true. It's just that there's so much that when rum is imported, there aren't a lot of rules at that point in time. If you go to Jamaica, there are rules about what rum is and what Jamaican rum is and what Jamaican rum isn't. If you go to Barbados, again, so much pride, there are laws.
Yeah.
You can't call it Barbados rum if this or that or A and B.
So when you say the Wild West, you mean in terms of people taking liberties with the spirit and doing things that they shouldn't be doing? Or could it be more the Wild West in the sense of this is a growing small category relative to vodka or whiskey or tequila, and that it is the Wild West in terms of opportunity?
I was saying more the prior, which is that a lot of people refer to rum as having no rules.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying is absolutely not true.
Just chaos.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not the case. It just is perceived that way because as a category, it's not maybe taken as seriously as some others. So while, there are so many rules in place for wine, for whiskey, because those are easier to pinpoint as regions, it seems there are more trade deals in place that kind of protect those traditions. And for some reason with rum, a lot of those traditions are overlooked when it comes to import. So what happens is a lot of people buying something in bulk that was made originally in Jamaica, but then they might put it in a wine barrel, add some sugar, do this or that, blah, blah, blah. And then you have a totally different animal at the other end, but they can legally put Jamaican rum on the label. Whereas people in Jamaica are pulling out their hair about that,
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I guess, what I was referring to. But that said, there is opportunity because it's a category that is often overlooked. And I will say right now, if you're a spirit nerd listening to this podcast, like now is the time to buy rum. It is It is so undervalued.
Oh, it's so cheap.
Especially for the age statement on some of these rums, it's wildly
I've seen
undervalued.
20-year-old bottles of rum that are under $60.
But is it?
But is it? That's maybe not.
Yeah.
That's the question.
And that's a whole conversation.
Yeah.
Well, as we talk about the real deal, or should I say the real McCoy, we are about to jump into the 5 main products here. And now that we have a little context for the types of pot stills and distillations that are done to do this single blended rum line, I think the first one here is sort of this like the lightest, faintest yellow color.
It's not like it's not clear.
Almost like a diluted white wine color.
Right.
More than anything. And
so what is this that we're drinking and how is it made?
So what we have here to start is the Real McCoy 3-year aged rum. A lot of people ask us, do you have like silver and dark and spiced or, those are all kind of modern inventions. We just have aged rum. Rum categorization is another, its own, seminar or conversation.
Sure.
But this is our lightest expression. It is kind of a straw color. As you said, it's not perfectly clear. That's because this is aged 3 years. You might say, I would think 3 years would look darker. It does. What we have here is something that we pass through charcoal. And that takes out some of those, the colors, but it also removes some of the tannins and linens from the barrel aging. And what you have is a cleaner expression of our fermentation. So I love the 3-year because it's the closest you're getting to, getting a lot of those fruit tropical notes from our fermentation, from the molasses wine that is our raw material. Something that you probably got a hint of with our coffee.
Yes.
Coffee still pure distillate that we started with. But this here, with that little benefit of the aging, kind of it hits this nice little sweet spot.
Now that last darker expression we tried at the outset, that has more color than what's in the glass now, and it also had a lot more of that molasses express.
Right.
This is a lot fruitier than sweeter molassesy.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think that's kind of a something that people might get confused about with rum too. Is if it's made from molasses, it's probably going to taste like blackstrap, right? Like blackstrap rum. Well, I mean, there's so much earthiness and minerality to molasses, and it's really just your sugar source for that fermentation. A lot can still happen, and a lot of that has to do with the yeast as well. In Barbados, we do very controlled fermentation. It's a closed-top fermentation, and we use one strain of proprietary yeast, but it is not something wild from the environment. So if you're in Jamaica, it's going to be open top fermentation. You're going to be getting like those mango tree yeasts, the banana trees, all this like natural environment is going to be affecting that flavor profile. And that's why we think of that round, bold, fruity funkiness with Jamaica.
Right.
And this, you have that clean, buttery coconut, like toasted kind of quality. And that's because it's just a very different process.
Very coconut, yes. So now, did you do the charcoal filtering specifically to make it palatable for cocktails? or was it just for the kind of tannic thing? Because I'm thinking back to like a Cristalino in tequila, where people are, again, stripping the color, bringing it back to a clear spirit, while still retaining a lot of that flavor for the cocktail culture.
Right. Yes, this is definitely kind of our cocktail-friendly offering. That said, I think our whole range is pretty cocktail-friendly, but this was to speak for those daiquiris, mojitos, and those types of applications. And what I didn't know until 2 years into this job, I was listening to Richard Seal, our distiller, speak, and I always learn a new nugget every time he opens his mouth. And somebody asked about just what you did. Why the 3-year and the filtration? It doesn't seem like that's really as classic Barbados. Why that decision? And he mentioned that at the time of its invention, the daiquiri, the Bacardi or the Cuban rum at the time that was used for that would have been aged 2 to 3 years, of course, dry style like ours, no sugar added, in Cuba. And, it would have been charcoal filtered as well. So it was a lightly aged white rum. And that's kind of what the daiquiri was invented with. So it was basically using that as a template to create a cocktail rum. So what I thought was interesting about that comment is this would be closer to the perfect daiquiri rum than many Cuban rums that are still available today.
Right.
Or you would be able to get your hands on. So that was kind of an interesting thing to think about. And that makes sense because it makes a really good daiquiri.
That was immediately my first thought. I mean, I think it's quite sippable on its own, but I think it's this... And because here's the thing. A lot of people think daiquiris are supposed to be this weird, iced down, super sugary thing.
Something blended out of like a frozen slushy machine.
I mean,
while that has its place, yeah,
exactly.
I'll drink them. I'm not above drinking.
I'll drink
stuff.
a Miami Vice any day.
Yep.
Yeah. But when you go for a classic daiquiri, it is so nuanced and it is so dependent on the rum.
Yeah.
And I can see this making a fantastic daiquiri.
Certainly also simple in a way. It's very simple. I even liked that first sample a little bit more. The first 3-year sample, the aged one.
Well, that was just the pot still distillate on its own.
Yeah.
Which, of course,
sort
is
of like that.
Maybe I did a disservice by having you taste that first.
I like the I think I want a little more molasses. So I'm at like a B- range, only in the sense that I'm at like an 82, 83 in my head. Just because it's really usable and functional, but that's about it. It's not gonna. No one's gonna jump out of their seat and go, "Oh my God, you got to try this."
Yeah, I'm actually a little higher than that. I'm at like a solid B, bordering on B+, and the reason for that is because you're at 40% alcohol, and I feel as though the body far surpasses that. Yep. And that's why with a rum that seems at least very cocktail friendly, this is going to far... you're going to get leaps and bounds ahead by buying this for your home bar, just because that it's just going to add that buttery mouthfeel for your cocktails. So I actually quite like it.
And there's a good reason for that too. Most of what its comparative set would be on the shelf in the liquor store at that price point is something that is made on that continuous still that you tried first.
Now, generally, what's the price range on the 3-year?
The 3-year is going to be in your low 20s.
Low 20s.
Wow.
And keep in mind...
Whoa,
come on, you're going to bump it up for that.
I would bump it up for that. I thought we were talking $30-$40 here.
No.
As far as I'm blown away.
I forgot we're talking about rum, guys. We're talking about rum here, and rum does not break the bank. It just doesn't.
As a reminder, so that first thing we tasted was a multi-column still. It tasted like vodka, right? That's what most quote-unquote silver rums at the market are.
Yep.
We are not only part column still, part pot. I mean, there's nothing that's price point that even has pot still.
Right.
Yeah.
At all. And we have no multi-column
across any
still.
spirit.
There's no one at this price point at all that doesn't have some multi-column still. So some people will put a little bit of this and that. Ours is the only one on the market that I'm aware of that is like all pot still at this point, and column still, like these older copper stills.
All right, I'll go 85. I moved it up.
There you go. I mean, no one's pressuring you, but come on.
It's a combination of what's in the bottle first and foremost, packaging and price.
Yeah.
And you start to look at that, and then you really envelop the story behind it all, and you kind of look at it and go, how do I feel about it? How would I explain this to somebody else? How would I use this on my own? And I think really for me, it's sitting on the shelf a lot longer than other products where I would have a hard time. But I also just don't make that many cocktails. It's part of my problem.
Yeah.
So if you're someone listening at home and you just don't make cocktails and you just want to pour something in the glass and drink it, this may not be that product, so to speak.
I get you.
Yeah. Some of what I do too is helping people think about other ways to use rum if they don't go to it as, they don't reach for it right away.
Yeah.
And what's kind of interesting about this rum in particular being so dry, with all of our rums, there's no sugar added, no glycerin, no additives of any kind, no flavorings, and definitely no sugar. So it actually can play in a martini, in a Bloody Mary, in a white Negroni. You can do a lot with this bottle that actually works really beautifully.
It's a vodka substitute in 1,000 different ways, while
having a lot more body and flavor.
Yeah.
So
a lot more flavor than 99 out of 100 vodkas, which it's supposed to, especially considering it spent time in a barrel and is made from a completely different source. I would say grain, but it's not a grain. Okay, Real McCoy 5-year.
Yeah. So we'll intro this rum, but can you also include the story of McCoy himself?
Absolutely. And this is actually the bottle where I tend to do that because this is our flagship.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So, cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Definitely give this one a nose because you're going to be getting a lot more going on.
Oh, yeah.
Here
we go. Now we're in my favorite part of rum.
So, Real McCoy was founded by Bailey Pryor. He's actually a documentary filmmaker by trade initially, and was making a film for PBS about Bill McCoy. Now, Bill McCoy was the pioneer rum runner during the American Prohibition era. So he was the first guy at January of 1920 who got out of Dodge, went down to the Caribbean on his boat, and thought, why don't I start collecting spirits to bring back up to the States? I'm sure people would like that. I would like that. And the first night he pulled up and dropped his anchor 3 miles out, because that was international waters, and basically just decided he was going to set up a little floating liquor store on his boat. So he started telling the passing boats, hey, tell your friends I have rum, I got whiskey, whatever you need. So, he was the first rum runner. And I mean, this is January of 1920. Like he got like a jump start on this right away.
Yep.
And, was an instant hit. That first night, a bunch of boats pulled up and, pretty quickly Rum Row was created, right? People started copying him. A bunch of boats lined up out there, this whole flotilla of people partying, getting drunk on the high seas. And it was just like a whole scene. But he was the first guy. And the reason he's so seen really as an American folk hero at this point in time is because he was also known as the most honest. He was known as the gentleman's crook. He was the guy that you could trust. And he wasn't going to, like everyone else was at that time, the mob in the city or other bootleggers or rum runners, he wasn't adulterating his product. He wasn't cutting it with turpentine or wood alcohol, prune juice, watering it down. He was selling 100% pure spirit at an honest price. So that, Bailey was kind of a similar personality on his own. And while making this film, I think was kind of inspired by this guy and, just how he was remembered and just how he was such a stand-up person. He didn't even drink himself. He was a teetotaler.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't
drink.
Doing
all of this stuff, hanging out with all these other folks buying booze, and he didn't drink one drop.
He was
a businessman.
he was ratired. This was his retirement plan. He was just wanted to be on his boat. So he was. It was the Real McCoy as a term that we know today. It means the real deal. It actually came from Bill because it was street slang in New York. Don't buy from the mob. Like go take a boat 3 miles out. It's worth it. Go get the Real McCoy. So that's where that comes from.
God.
Yeah, it's okay. So this is the Real McCoy that I'm holding in my glass because this is awesome. It's packed full of flavor. it's jumping out of the glass.
I mean, it's cinnamon, it's baking spices. I get a little bit of coffee.
Yep.
Which is a really nice, and it's like the coffee beans. Mm-hmm. It's like sticking your nose into a bag of coffee and smelling it.
It's a little greener than you might think about with coffee, but it's there.
Yeah, and of course it does come through with a little more of the molassesy sweetness that you would expect. But as we've talked about, what I really like is the fact that it doesn't finish sweet.
Yep.
It is, as you've talked about, it's dry. And that's really nice because I do think that, if something is too sugary, as you start to mature your drinking palate, that's definitely a turnoff. I mean, when I think of cloyingly sweet, that is a bad thing. I don't care what spirit it is. I'm with you. I quite like this.
That's a big rum myth, which is good to squash right away, which is that rum equals sweet. And then or caloric. It's made from sugar, so it must be higher in calories. That's completely not true.
Yeah.
Sugar is sugar, fermentation is fermentation.
Yeast ate it, and it's the same.
It depends on what you put in later. And I mean, trust me, there are many, many vodkas and tequilas on the market that are way more caloric and sugary.
No, I mean, this has a lot of, I'm getting like an almondy finish almost, and a little bit of like a flowery sort of body with that dryness. It's nice. It's really nice. And I get that cinnamon baking thing you're talking about at the forefront, but it really fades out and it does dry out a little bit, but it really lingers. And what's the proof on this?
So the core that we're about to taste, it's all 80%, 40%.
All five of these?
80%.
Yeah.
40%.
Got it.
Yep.
They don't do anything at like a cask or barrel strength or anything like that?
We'll get there.
Okay,
Gotcha.
fair enough.
Yeah, so the 3-year, the 5-year you just had, and then the 12-year that we're going to have next, that's what we kind of call our core. That's our main kind of arsenal that is meant to appeal to bartenders and home mixologists for different types of cocktail applications. And they also show a range in, what our barrel maturation can do. It's just kind of that's our lineup.
What kind of barrels are we talking about with the barrel aging?
Sure, and that's actually also what differentiates us from the other releases at Foursquare, because you might know that Foursquare releases more than just Real McCoy. There's actually a line just called Foursquare. That's Richard Seale's Exceptional Cask series, and those are the nerdier rums that come out of the distillery.
I would imagine the audience on this show maybe has not heard of Foursquare, but it's certainly worth checking out. And it
is certainly worth checking out.
Yeah, they fetch a bit of a higher price point than these ones.
They do. They've become quite collectible. In fact, I think it was once, maybe it was Punch Drink called Richard's Rums, the Pappy of rum. As soon as that kind of came out, people started thinking about it that way. They realized that there are these very undervalued but amazingly made, niche, small run, high proof, super nerdy spirits that were coming out of Barbados that were arguably as interesting or more interesting than a lot of these very collectible whiskeys on the market.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of whiskey drinkers turning to rum as like, oh my God, there's this whole other world, and it really is exciting. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that with his Exceptional Cask series, and then also what we'll get to at the end here, which is some of our limited editions.
Gotcha.
That are in that higher proof and small limited run.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Any reason on the 5-12 year versus where's an 8 or a 7 or what's the
with Dorley's, which is one of his other lines, mostly for Europe. There is I think there is an 8-year. He does a couple different age statements than with this. We liked these because again we started with the 5. That was the flagship. That was in a discussion between Richard and Bailey when they first kind of collaborated on this. It was, the inspiration being Prohibition era, right? So we're talking about the 20s. And so Richard decided, if we're going 1920s, in Barbados at that time, what would have been the most common and available would have been something aged in ex-bourbon barrels, probably about 5 years old, probably about this, So they kind of tried to approximate the era, and even down to the bottle shape. This is an actual Prohibition era bottle that Bailey found and cast. So
that's cool.
Yeah, the idea was really kind of evoke that moment in Barbados and in the States and bridging that gap. So which was kind of a fun project, having this 4th generation Barbadian rum maker and then this like gregarious, East Coast boat guy getting together and making this rum. It really spoke to, old American tradition, but also Caribbean tradition, and it was a beautiful little collaboration there.
That's awesome. Well, as we move on to the next rum, what I would love to hear then, kind of piggybacking off of that, we've talked about the story of the Real McCoy, but you say that Barbados is the birthplace of rum. Do you have any history in terms of like how this spirit was sort of originally made or discovered or kind of gained prominence in that area?
Yeah, prove it. Let's see some papers, man.
It's tough. I mean, the receipts are hard to find. There is the first time, though. I mean, I think the first, what it really is with Barbados is it's the first time that there was documented use of the word rum and rumbullion that came up on, some sort of a deed for a plantation or something like that. And that goes back to, I mean, this was after the Dutch settled in Barbados, and gosh, it was like the 1620s, I believe. So, a lot of the islands had, rum development happening around the same time, but Barbados is just, they go back kind of the furthest, and actually a great resource a really digestible resource for rum history is Wayne Curtis's book, And a Bottle of Rum. And I like it because it's like an easy kind of vacation read. It's a paperback. Every chapter is about a different cocktail, and it kind of takes you through the history of rum through cocktails. And so it does start actually in Barbados, talking about, just that wild, rough, intense spirit that kind of started this whole thing out. And then, from there it goes to Cuba and talks about the mojito and Cuban rum and all of the politics involved, and kind of gives you a nice overview of the very complex world that is rum history. I mean, it's not really something we can attack in an hour even.
Fair enough.
Is rum something that is somewhat scarce? Because I think one thought I've had is that it's not, given the implied age statements as well as the price. And a lot of times price and demand play in somewhat from like a market perspective. Is rum, or is a certain region's rum somewhat scarce in any way, or is there an ample amount of this? Is Real McCoy going to be able to put out a 5 and a 12 year for quite a while?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that, as opposed to say agave, rum is made from grass. Sugarcane is grass.
Yeah.
It grows very easily, very quickly. It grows all over the world. So if you have the production facility, then yes, you can
barrel it.
There's layers to that. Are you doing fresh cane? Are you doing molasses? So, rum as a category needs to be made from sugar. That can be cane, fresh cane juice. It can be cane syrup, which is increasingly popular because that's that first round of refinement. You're kind of cooking it down into a sugar syrup. So it's more expensive, but it has more sweetness, more flavor. But it also is more sustainable than juice. So like in Haiti, if you're having a lot of people who are making Clarin in Haiti, which is kind of the Haitian version of rum, almost more like mezcal production, though it's like everyone does it in their garage,
Yeah.
But because of the climate, a lot of people are cooking down that sugarcane juice. So it's more shelf stable. So there are different reasons why people might be doing that. And then from there, molasses, which is the last step in sugar refinement. After you have your crystals, like the byproduct is molasses. So almost all the sweetness is extracted. You have something that's very minerally, very dense, very earthy, but has a lot of nice content. And, you could argue terroir for fermentation. So, if you have a bunch of sugarcane fields, of course, that's very sustainable. And if you're doing juice, you're just crushing it down, growing more. If you're doing molasses, well, then that's a whole nother production, right? A lot of islands now have centralized refinement, sugar refinement refineries, such as on Barbados. Foursquare itself is an old sugar plantation and refinery turned distillery. So they don't actually make their own molasses anymore, but they do have their own sugarcane fields. And the way it works is there's one national refinery where they cut one of their fields, have it all shipped over, they process it, they get their molasses back. So, some people ask, well, how are you 100% sure that it's all coming from your fields? Well, there's not really any way to fully know, but it is all Barbados. And I think that would be a bigger issue if we were maybe like certified organic, but because of the soil in Barbados, it's not actually the best soil for growing sugarcane, which is funny considering that's really what the island's known for. But there is some nitrogen-rich additive in our soil that was the only thing that would make us not organic. The thing to keep in mind is you don't use pesticide on grass. You don't need to.
Right.
So there's absolutely no pesticide. I mean, we basically would be if it weren't for that soil.
Yeah, I think the one portion to that, though, like when you think of vodka, it's not aged, and therefore it has no age statement, and it gets made and goes right into the bottle right after it's distilled and proofed down. And in this instance, the scarcity question's more maybe geared towards bourbon's corn. There's plenty of corn, right?
Right.
We're not in a corn shortage of anything that I'm aware of. But it's the age statements that really start to...
Yeah. If we're talking about that, then yes. If you're talking about a higher aged rum, then of course, if it's a real age statement, yes.
Yeah.
That's why, though, you see a lot of kind of shady practices, because there will be people that are just pumping out this rum, and you'll see it at every duty-free shop around the world, and it'll have like a 20+ number on the bottle. But how is that really possible? If you really start thinking about it, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. And that's because there is actually, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation in rum labeling in particular. A lot of spirits, but rum in particular has a pretty...
So if it has some 20 versus like an American standard where you always put the number of the youngest, let's say, whiskey in the bottle, or in the blend, right? So if you've got a 4, an 8, a 10, a 12, and a 20 barrel in the blend to make whiskey X,
right?
You got to call it that 4 year if the 4 is the youngest in there.
Yep.
And I believe that's true of any ratio or proportions, even if it's 80% 20-year-old and 5% 4, 5% 5, 5% 10, whatever.
Right.
You still got to call it the youngest. Now in rum, that is not the case or designation.
That's not the case. And there's a lot of ways around that. One that is really, well known, and it's not that it's really as shady, it's just part of what it is. Solera, right? Solera process, like in sherry, it just means that part of the contents of that bottle are that age.
But you can put that age then on the bottle.
Correct. So it'll say Solera in tiny print, 20 in huge print. And people say, oh, I love that 20-year aged rum. And it's like, well, and then you taste it. And if you have an experienced palate, you're going to get, wow, there's so much dye and glycerin in this it's completely insane. And if it was truly aged that long, you wouldn't want to hide that with. I mean, additives are only there when the product isn't standing up for itself in the first place, right? So if people are using a giant multi-column metal still, like we were talking about in the very beginning, maybe it's aluminum, your output is going to be neutral and dry, but it's going to be astringent and probably a little bit sulfurous. So that's why there are white rums that are adding sugar and glycerin. Because you might think, well, why are they needing to add anything if it's just like a pure spirit? Well, it's because it doesn't have any flavor, and it's actually probably a little off. Similarly, if you're trying to replicate an aged spirit, you're going to be adding things to give it that mouthfeel, to give it that richness, to give it the color, and to give it a depth of flavor. I think one of the worst things about rum, to gripe a little bit, is this kind of concept of dark rum, because it doesn't really exist, or a blackstrap rum. Blackstrap molasses is what's used pretty much for all rum. It doesn't make your rum dark. The distillate's going to be clear. And it's not, usually it's just something that's added to make it seem like like you said before, oh, I don't get molasses from this. Well, you really shouldn't. If it tastes like molasses, that probably means somebody added molasses flavor or molasses into the rum.
Mm. Gotcha. Well, I certainly got the impression of a more molasses and or bittersweet, almost dessert-like quality from the 5-year. And just to full circle here, I'm going to give it a 90, an A-. I thought it was quite good. I know that this is probably not going to break my bank and should be something I have at home all the time. And my question on scarcity, to come full circle on that, was really to help maybe get people's ears and eyebrows raising a little bit, going, wait a second. Maybe I should buy a bottle or 2 or 10 of these before the age statement goes down or goes away, or suddenly it doesn't have the weight of what we just discussed in terms of...
Well, and we're seeing that with whiskey, right? I mean, Elijah Craig 12, it doesn't exist anymore. There's all these releases that are now becoming blends. Actually just recently, we didn't get, Barkeeper and stuff like didn't have Eagle Rare on the shelf for months. And I started wondering, I was like, I bet you when it comes back, it's not going to say 10 years.
10 star.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 10.
Number 10.
Yeah.
Eagle Rare number 10.
You just don't know. But to that point, yes, it's a wonderful category to start collecting because the prices are going to go up,
Yeah.
They are. And Cam, where are you at on this 5-year?
Oh, the 5-year. I'm at like a B+.
Okay.
I'm actually, the only reason I really have to give it that is because I've already started sipping on the 12-year and I quite like it. So maybe I kind of jumped ahead of myself, but
I'm drinking mine too.
That's okay.
I've been nosing mine. I haven't haven't pulled the trigger yet. But
Yeah.
I'm
So
about
tell us about this 12-year.
Sure. So, this is obviously a bit of a jump in age. And like I said earlier, we're just trying to show a range here of what tropical aging does, and that it's actually considerable. It's funny when I hear people kind of, hem and haw over in añejo tequila or an extra añejo, and then they turn to the rum page and go, do you have anything like 25 years old? And it's like, dude, you were just like... differentiating a couple of months on a tequila, but then when it comes to rum, you want something that is decades older. And that's crazy for a lot of the reasons we've already kind of touched on. But, with the 12-year, something to keep in mind, and with our whole range, every single drop in that bottle is that age. So 5 years isn't the youngest in our 5-year. It's all 100% 5 years aged in whiskey barrels. And same with this 12. So the reason that generally, and I'm going to turn around one of these bottles, the reason that you won't see much older than 12 years coming out of a lot of the Caribbean islands is because it just doesn't make sense. Keep in mind, in Barbados, there aren't really seasons. It's hot and humid every day of the year. And we're aging in open air rickhouses, so our angel share is incredibly high.
Yeah.
We lose 6 to 8% every year out of the barrel. So again, this is 100% 12-year aged juice that's aged in Barbados. So do the math. We lose a majority of this rum in the making of it. So that's very valuable.
Now, at 12 years, how much ABV is left in that barrel at the end of that anyways? It's come down considerable amount. But also with rum, you don't have the same barrel entry restrictions as, say, a whiskey. So you have the ability then to go into the barrel at a higher proof and therefore have a better shield up against that angel share being so high.
Correct.
And as just for anyone listening, there's a certain rule or thought process around the hotter and drier it is can actually cause the ABV to rise, whereas the cooler and more damp and like the weather in Scotland, for example,
right,
the angel share will actually go much higher, and you'll lose more alcohol.
Really? Because I know in Scotland, I believe, they lose probably, because they have the
2 to
seasons
4,
too. 2 to 4, right?
Yeah.
And then 3 to 4, maybe Kentucky. And then, like Caribbean.
Well, Texas will actually go up. And Nevada and Arizona, you can actually see whiskey ABVs rise due to extreme heat and dryness. Whereas, a more humid and fluctuating temperature. Now, but here we're talking about
now it's
hot and humid. So
and
it's
humid
a different
and very
world.
consistent. Yeah.
Which is
Hot and
interesting because
humid.
it mimics the fermentation temperatures of India, which we recently explored.
Yep.
And also...
Well, we explored a part of India. We explored Goa, which is a western coastal region, whereas something aged in Delhi it would be totally
true.
California
But
coastline,
it is that
ain't
hot.
Texas.
It's the warmer, humid climates. I mean, Taiwan again, the Kavalan.
Right.
I'm imagining there's very
tropical.
If my mental map is correct, these aren't too far.
Off the equator,
latitude-wise, or whatever.
latitude.
Yeah, we're pretty close to the equator.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're sipping on the 12-year. This thing is
this is a monster. I mean, this is what I love. I love the banana and coconut in this one.
Dates. I get dried dates, prune.
And this is where the barrel is shining here. Absolutely. Now you're starting to get those darker cherries.
Yep.
All
of that kind of
Amarena cherry. That darker
little orange rind. That's really nice. Yeah, a little bit of almost brandied thing happening at that point.
Absolutely.
It is reminiscent of brandy in a way.
Yeah,
a lot more than the 5-year was.
Very much so. And I very much like this. This to me easily gets into the A- range.
Dare I say sweeter for some reason? It just
it is,
sweeter.
but it's such a complex sweetness. That's the interesting thing about it. And it would be wrong of me to just say, oh, it's sweeter than the other ones. Perception-wise, overall, maybe a little bit, but you will be able to really differentiate what those sweet notes are and why they work, whether it's as a sipping rum or, I mean, gosh, this would make an incredible cocktail. But this is easily the first one where I would say, hands down, you're in sipping territory for rum. So.
I would have said the last one was equally sipping and had a dryness that I liked a bit more than maybe some of the sweeter notes that are showcased in the 12-year. I'm gonna go 89, like high B+ on this, because I just think the 5-year was actually quite good.
Well, that's awesome.
I like the 5-year better.
I find too that sometimes there's like that entry point, and then you kind of move on, right? So I at first. Same. I thought the 12-year was my jam. That was my sipper. And then I'm at a point now where I like those edges of the 5-year a little bit more.
Yep.
My palate got pretty comfortable with the 12, and now I sip the 5 pretty much exclusively just because I like it still having that sharpness and brightness.
All right. So these last two we've got here at the end of the table, they're a little bit different. They're separated from the core line a little bit. So Nathan, tell us what are these? Well, what's the next one in line, and why are these two in their own somewhat subcategory within the lineup?
Well, as we mentioned, Foursquare does the Exceptional Cask series, and Bailey, of course, wanted to have a little fun as well. Richard allows him to do one limited per year. So the first one a few years back was a 12-year in Madeira cask. Which I wish I had to share with you. It is really beautiful. And Madeira actually is a really common barrel in Barbados as well, because it was often the last stop before people crossed the Atlantic. So they would often show up with barrels of Madeira to gift to plantation owners or, the elite, but then they also would show up with a bunch of empty barrels because they drank them all at sea. So nice. Aging in Madeira is very common in Barbados. So that was a really fun one. But then we did this, what a lot of people ask, why are you tasting me on a 10-year after we just drank a 12-year? Because this one has a white label with a big 10 on it. Well, that's because this is now getting a little higher proof. So these are at 92, which we call distiller's proof. It's kind of a really nice kind of sweet spot for tasting the complexity and depth without having that kind of high proof limitation. I feel like that can happen when you get to a certain point.
Sure.
It's just, your palate isn't quite, it's almost getting burned. You're not getting the actual full flavor. So 92 is what we kind of landed on as like this nice sweet spot. The 10-year refers to the age of so this actually is similar to what you said about whiskey. In this case, this isn't 100% 10 years. This is 10 years in virgin white oak barrels, and then a little bit of our 12-year bourbon barrel is in there as well. But we call it the 10 because that's the youngest.
Got it. So it does follow that sort of American mentality. This is dangerously easy to drink. It's really going down.
I love it. It's really spicy. It's got this spicy note that hasn't come into play quite yet, really at all, if not, certainly not at this prominence. it's a wild departure from any of the sweeter notes that I got on the 12. It's really cool.
Yeah, this has also been a big one for us as far as changing minds. I've had a lot of total whiskey nerds drink this and go, whoa. We actually, Fred Minnick, we did an event at Jackalope with Pedro and Fred Minnick, and he did a bunch of rare whiskey tastings. Then we just slipped this one in, and as a blind tasting. And nobody really raised their hand and said, why did you give me a rum and a whiskey tasting?
Right.
It didn't really come up. People were maybe a little confused about what they were drinking, but everybody loved it. And we've also done some blind tastings where, no one's ever really picked it out. You get so much of those whiskey notes, but without, I think what's nice about that though, is you're getting a really nice expression of that virgin oak, in a cleaner distillate maybe than a lot of whiskeys are. So it's an interesting way to explore the wood in a way.
Yeah.
It really comes out. And would I pick this as not a whiskey in a whiskey lineup? Perhaps, but it does deliver, I think, something the other three do not, which is a more robust. We have not gotten into the fact that oak was a real pronounced flavor that was flying out of the either aroma or flavor profiles of the last three, whereas here it's doing a lot more work.
It's definitely the heavy lifter.
Really propping up the spirit in a way that I like, coupled with higher proof and also a really refined sort of starts sweet but really dissipates quick and gets right into this grittier, earthier finish that's lingering a lot more than the 3 or the 5. I like it, man.
Yeah, when you said tobacco on the last one, I didn't get it a lot. Now is when it's coming through. Now it's like rich, kind of smoky, spicy on the back end.
I'm a fan.
I am a fan, but I'm also somewhat confused. Right? And I do think it takes people out of the realm of rum, which is a good thing, but it's also now the 4th in a lineup of rum that I've been starting to enjoy. And this is such a clear departure. So I'm kind of like, whoa, like I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around it. But I think it's quite good, and it's certainly discussion worthy, which is really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to keep in mind with that too, is it's no longer available. Like these are so limited that they come, they're interesting, and then they go. So this was a 2017 release.
Oh, okay.
How many of these are made? Like when they do these, how many come out?
That one I believe was 3,000 or 5,000 bottles only.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
gotcha.
And it's one release a year.
Yeah, except in some cases it's like a year. It's not on the calendar.
Sure.
About a year and a half.
Is there a time frame in when people should look for these, or keep an eye out for a limited edition?
Not necessarily, but what I will say is keep an eye out for a limited edition, because we actually have a new one coming out soon, and I really hope to have a sample in hand for today, but I don't have one yet. But we can talk about that after this.
All right, so let's move to the last one. And I'm at a 91 on that one.
Yeah,
I'm
at a solid B+.
I liked it more than the 12 and more than the 5, hence the 91. But
well, I think that's what's interesting about the line is we're both going through and picking up things that we like more than the other person in different bottles.
If this is the first episode you're listening to, Cameron and I do not agree.
No,
not
not that often,
rarely.
actually.
unless there's a real showstopper that we can't deny. But we tend to vary
ever so slightly.
Subtleties.
What are we ending on here in the limited releases?
Whoa.
So as I mentioned, you generally won't see too much older than 12 years in the Caribbean for those obvious reasons of angel share with a true age statement. In this case, though, Richard found some older barrels in one of the rickhouses that were 14 years old. So decided, hey, let's have some fun with these. And this is the same barrel treatment as our core line. This is the ex-whiskey barrel, bourbon barrel. But it's 14 full years and then at that higher proof, the 92 proof. So this is something that had never happened before. Foursquare had never released in 4 generations of a rum family. The Seals had never released anything older than 12 years. So this was kind of a big deal last year when we came out with a 14-year rum. The nerds rejoiced.
And I don't know if these are the same price in the years that they came out or if they have varying prices.
No,
but
they are more expensive when they're older for sure.
No, but these 2 last ones, what do they ring in at?
Like if you can catch them when they release.
If you saw one.
Oh, gosh. I think the 10 was probably in like the $70 range and maybe like 85 or so on the 14. But again, ridiculously cheap for what they are.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
I've paid more than that for a 2-year-old bourbon, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't judge me.
We know you have a problem, Seth.
I'm looking at it right now.
See, I really like this because I feel like now we're in this beautiful line between those rum flavors that we have been exploring. Mm-hmm. The banana, the coconut, a little bit of kind of baking spice, a little bit of tropical fruits, kind of pineapple-y thing happening. And then there's this just rich cinnamony raisin plums, and it's good, man.
I get like hints of banana bread,
mm-hmm.
and then I still get that underlying sort of date-like,
mm-hmm.
Almost
I got like a sherry
Concord grape kind of thing going on. It's
yeah, the wood's
beautiful.
not as sharp on this one. I think it's now a lovely backbone, and that's why I think it's quite well balanced, and it's gonna easily play in the A- range for me.
The mouthfeel on this one really lasts a lot longer. I would have thought this was even higher proof than the last one or the ones before. It really drinks almost
mm-hmm.
like a 50%er to me, because of that lingering sort of taste bud centric. Like my gums are dried out, but my tongue is just receiving
inside
all
of the
the flavor.
Cheese, it's just sitting right there.
Yeah, it's on the back of the tongue for 5 minutes now. It's been sitting there.
You thought the 10 stuck out a little bit as not seeming as traditional, or the virgin oak taking you somewhere else. Well, that's actually going to become more common too moving forward. Richard has built a cooperage at Foursquare and is going to be doing a lot more virgin oak aging moving forward. And also, as we spoke about with the molasses, sugarcane, sugar syrup, he's going to start doing more sugar syrup as well. So there is actually kind of an interesting evolution happening just with sustainability and all sorts of other reasons why he's shifting the way that he's doing some of these things. So, of course, making your own barrels versus shipping barrels from somewhere else down to a Caribbean island, and doing shelf stable.
That's intense. Yeah,
there's a lot of new things happening. That actually just reminds me that I haven't mentioned, but it is a completely no waste distillery at Foursquare. So it's completely solar powered. All of our spent fluids get pH balance and go out to irrigate. All of our spent solids go to fuel and feed. It's an incredibly green distillery. And in fact, with Real McCoy too, we don't do, the only plastic we really do is the cap on the top of our cork. Everything else, even the labels, are recycled paper. It's recycled glass. All of our POS is like handmade wood, leather, twine. It's just, there's
awesome.
There's a real concentrated kind of effort done to be
You said at the beginning,
sustainable.
They're doing everything right.
Like I said.
The little details seem to matter, and there's clearly an appreciation for the spirit that's coming through, not only just the liquid itself, but the story and the legacy here.
There's some thought behind everything that's happening here.
I think another thing about Richard and Foursquare, it's easy to be compared to your peers, and when you're right there alongside, Grenada and St. Lucia and Jamaica, and there's a lot of interesting flavors and things happening. Some people will look at Foursquare and go, well, why should I care about you? Like, why are you special? What are you doing that's different? And Richard will say, well, it's not that I'm doing anything different. I'm consistent and I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
And to him, the fact that we don't use a recipe, it's all done by his palate. And, he oversees every aspect. So it's not like...
He must have a good palate.
He has a fantastic palate.
This is good stuff.
And he's not working, he doesn't have separate, people doing everything that there's, so much lost in translation. It's like, no, he's making sure that every single aspect is done correctly. And the fact that these blends that, again, have multiple components going to these blends, right? There's a light and a heavy of both the pot still and the coffee still that are all being blended together. The fact that they're this consistent and so balanced, to me, that I was like, that is artistry. And it might not be the most exciting, brightest, wildest thing that you could see or taste, but what it is done just expertly,
Yeah. Well, for me, this is definitely some of the best rum I've ever tasted, period. And it is one of those things where it's just exciting to learn more about this spirit. So maybe one of the things, Nathan, you could do to leave everyone with is like, what's something that you want people to take away about rum that, whether it's for the novice or for the expert, like what's kind of like the word that you want to get out, public service announcement style about rum?
Oh, wow. That's heavy. No, I think
is good.
rum is good. I think really what it is that I don't like, when people say they don't like rum, and it's because there literally, if there's any category where I can say it confidently, there is a rum for everyone out there. There are so many different profiles and kind of like directions you can go with it. Don't be afraid of rum. Rum is beautiful. It does require, a little dedication and research to start understanding what good rum is, because let's be honest, this is a market that is very divided. There is rum that a lot of people think of first, which is these commercial rums that aren't very good, and unfortunately give the whole category a bad rap. But there's an amazing, amazing world of real rum out there. And that's what we do is real rum. And there's a lot of amazing distilleries out there that we've now become really good friends with. And we call it Rum Family. They're our Rum Fam. And it's people all over the world who are doing it the right way. And that's become like this galvanized community that really looks out for each other and just helps get that gospel out of, no, rum is good, rum is important. There is rum out there that you will like. And in fact, here, it's in my glass, drink it. Like,
is there any American rum that you've tried that really impressed you?
Yes. Richland rum. I believe it's Georgia. I think that's correct.
Richland rum.
Richland. Yeah. They're doing actually a very similar process to Richard. However, I believe they're using a hybrid still, but they're using the sugar syrup, like I was saying.
Gotcha.
So that's the process they're using, and their rum, without sweetening it, adding any additives after maturation, it does drink similar to kind of like our 5-year, because it is a craft, very very crafty distillery. I think it runs you a bit more in cost, interestingly, but it's a tasty rum. They do a good job. Because, honestly, a lot of domestic distillers, unfortunately, I feel like they make rum as an afterthought. They're like, well, let's also make a rum. And then they just use evaporated cane as their sugar base.
Yeah.
So there's literally like just nothing going on. There's no flavor. There's nothing exciting about it. They've started calling it blonde rum, which just hurts me.
Our whiskey's still aging in the back, but we've put out a rum, gin, and vodka for you in the meantime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
wow.
There are a couple. But yeah, but yeah, my message is don't be afraid. Just keep exploring. Like if you have rum that you don't like, keep going. And honestly, when in doubt, go Jamaican. Oh my God, so good.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, this has been to me an incredible tasting. You never know exactly what to expect when you get a whole lineup like this, and I felt like I could very well see the through line here.
I'm a little freaked out because I think I'm going to go buy a bunch of rum now. And I can't afford it right now, but I'm going to do it. And it's going to be...
Well, because I know there's at least 2 bottles on the table right now that you've eyed up. You're like, I need to own this.
I'm going to go
why don't I have this?
Stupid money on rum I don't need because I got more than I can drink in 2 lifetimes. And it's just like, now it's going to happen.
I'll tell you what, I make the pledge to help out.
Oh, God.
I mean, not buy it, but like drink it.
You ruined me, man. It's fucked up.
I like to be that gateway drug for people.
There you go. There you go. I appreciate that. And we since this is a podcast, we're not video on this one. I do have to mention, I almost feel like this is good parting words of the Daiquiri Queen shirt that you have on. I didn't even notice it really, what it specifically said until now. But that's a good way to kind of leave people with good sipping rum. And then, hey, if as well, you can go make a daiquiri. So,
yep.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, cheers, Nathan. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate you.
Hey, appreciate
Thanks
you
a
guys.
bunch.
All right.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Cameron and Seth here. Just a few more things before we wrap up. First, you can always head on over to cartelhour.com for the show notes, which will include links to all the spirits mentioned and, of course, consumed on the podcast.
Absolutely. If you're interested in purchasing any of the spirits mentioned on the podcast, go ahead and click any of the links to be taken directly to those spirits or visit caskcartel.com. They are America's largest online premium spirits marketplace and have been featured in Rolling Stones magazine, Men's Journal, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, MarketWatch, and many others.
Yeah, they are awesome and super mobile friendly too. They're a fantastic resource to search through different types of spirits, and their platform is easy and straightforward. If you don't love driving around to every single liquor store in town and hoping they have what you're looking for, Cask Cartel is certainly the best e-commerce spirits platform I've personally come across.
Couldn't agree more. And you can find them on social media at Cask Cartel, and you can find us at Cartel Hour for the podcast, where you can find information about upcoming episodes and live tastings at the Infusory.
And speaking of those live tastings, for those living in or visiting the Los Angeles area that are truly intrigued, if you want to drink along with us, we would love to have you come and enjoy an evening at the Infusory to drink through a carefully selected assortment of spirits.
We offer custom flights and have a robust library of over 700 spirits to choose from. Visit our website for more information on how to become a member of the Cartel Club.
And if you're a spirits brand that would like to be featured on the podcast, please email us or send us a direct message on Instagram.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and remember to always drink responsibly
and in good company.